The first images are out. U.S. Navy vessels, positioned, deliberate. And the message they're sending isn't just military, it's something much bigger than a show of force. Everyone is focused on the nuclear negotiations, the diplomatic back and forth, the headlines about talks possibly resuming, but almost no one is paying attention to what's happening on the water right now, and that might change how we understand the entire situation. Because when a superpower moves ships into position around another country's coastline, that's not background noise, that's the signal. So the real question is, what is the United States actually trying to do here, and does Iran have any room left to maneuver? This is independent geopolitical analysis and personal opinion only. All information is based on publicly available reports. I could be wrong. To understand what's happening, you need a little context. Iran sits at one of the most strategically critical locations on Earth. The Strait of Hormuz, a narrow waterway off Iran's southern coast, is the passage through which roughly 20% of the world's oil supply flows every single day, whoever controls access to that. Strait holds enormous leverage over global energy markets. That's not an opinion, that's geography. Now, according to publicly available reports from major international news agencies and defense monitoring organizations, the United States has been increasing its naval presence in the Persian Gulf and surrounding waters over the past several weeks. The images circulating now show U.S. warships in visible proximity to Iranian territorial waters. This is not the first time America has deployed naval assets to this region, but the timing, the visibility, and the scale are drawing serious attention from analysts and governments alike. Iran, for its part, has been under a layered system of economic sanctions for years, restrictions on its oil exports, its banking system, and its ability to conduct international trade. The term blockade is being used carefully by some, more aggressively by others. What is not in dispute is that U.S. naval positioning has the potential to significantly tighten those restrictions in a very physical, very visible way. Here's what I think is really happening. The images themselves are the message. This is deliberate signaling, not an accident of patrol routes. When a government allows or orchestrates the release of footage showing warships in a specific position, they are communicating something to multiple audiences at the same time, to Iran's leadership. The message is about leverage ahead of any potential negotiation. To allies in the Gulf region, Saudi Arabia, the way Israel, the message is about reassurance and commitment. And to a domestic American audience, it's about projecting strength at a moment when U.S. foreign policy credibility is being questioned on several fronts simultaneously. The critical word here is coercive diplomacy. This is a well-documented strategic concept where military positioning is used not to start a war, but to change the calculation of the other side. You make the cost of non-compliance visible, tangible, and credible without firing a single shot. The ships on the water are essentially a negotiating tool wrapped in steel. And right now, the United States appears to be using them to squeeze Iran's options before any formal talks gain real momentum. But here's where it gets interesting. Iran is not without its own tools in this dynamic, and the leadership in Tehran has demonstrated for decades that it does not respond well to what it perceives as public humiliation or coercion. In fact, historically, pressure applied too visibly on Iran has often produced the opposite of the intended effect, hardening internal political positions, reducing the space for moderates, and giving hardliners exactly the narrative they need. So while the U.S. may be trying to bring Iran to a more compliant posture, there is a real risk that these images now circulating globally actually make a negotiated outcome harder, not easier. Iranian state media will use this footage. Internal political factions opposed to any engagement with Washington will use it, and the Iranian military, which has its own interests and institutional culture, may feel pressure to respond in some form, not necessarily through direct confrontation, but through proxy activity, through harassment of commercial shipping, or through acceleration of elements of its nuclear program that it believes can be used as bargaining chips. The escalation ladder here has many rungs, and both sides know how to climb it slowly. Most people are missing this part of the picture. The blockade framing, if that's what this becomes formally, does not exist in isolation. It intersects with at least three other active geopolitical dynamics happening right now. First, there are ongoing, fragile conversations about the future of the Iran nuclear deal and any naval escalation complicates the diplomatic track significantly, because it changes the political optics for Iranian negotiators who need to show their own public they are not capitulating under military threat. Second, regional actors, particularly Israel, have their own calculations here. A tighter naval grip on Iran serves Israeli strategic interests, and there is almost certainly coordination happening at levels not visible in public reporting. Third, China and Russia are watching. Both have maintained economic relationships with Iran despite sanctions, and both have strategic incentives to frame American naval presence as destabilizing rather than defensive. Expect their diplomatic responses to arrive quietly but with real weight. The situation is layered in a way that makes simple narratives America is containing Iran or this is the start of a conflict both incomplete. Reality here is more interesting, more uncertain, and more consequential than either framing suggests. If this analysis is correct, here are 2 or 3 things to watch closely in the next 30–60 days. First, watch whether Iran makes any formal statement through its foreign ministry or supreme leader's office that specifically addresses the naval positioning. The language they choose, whether they call it a blockade, a provocation, or simply an act of aggression, will tell you a great deal about which internal political faction currently has the upper hand in Tehran. Second, watch commercial shipping data in the Strait of Hormuz. If vessels begin rerouting or if insurance premiums for that corridor spike significantly, that's a market signal that traders and analysts believe the risk is real and escalating, not performative. Third, watch U.S. Gulf state diplomatic activity. If there are high-level visits, phone calls, or joint military announcements between Washington and Riyadh or Abu Dhabi in the coming weeks, it suggests the United States is actively building regional architecture around this pressure campaign, which would indicate this is a sustained strategy, not a temporary display. Any one of these signals, or a combination of them, would tell us whether this situation is moving toward de-escalation, stalemate, or something more dangerous. This is independent analysis only, not news. I could be wrong, and I genuinely encourage you to read multiple sources, challenge every assumption including mine, and form your own view. If you want geopolitical breakdowns that go beyond the headlines analysis that tries to understand the structure beneath the surface, subscribe to this channel, and I want to know what you think. Do you believe this is calculated pressure that will bring Iran to the table, or does it push the region closer to a confrontation nobody actually wants? Drop your analysis in the comments. The best geopolitical conversations happen when people bring different perspectives together. All information in this video is based on publicly available reports and represents personal opinion and analysis only.